Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are taking on a giant. I don't use that word lightly.
No, not at all.
We are talking about a name that is practically synonymous with luxury, with France, and with a very specific kind of effortless, intimidating cool. We're talking about Gabrielle Coco Chanel.
It is a massive topic. You would be hard-pressed to find a brand with more global recognition.
Right.
The double C logo, the number 5 perfume, the quilted bags with the chain straps. It is part of the cultural furniture. It's the uniform of a certain type of success.
Exactly. But the mission for today's deep dive is a little different. We aren't just here to talk about hem lengths or, the price of a handbag.
Not just that.
We are here to look at the massive, sometimes incredibly uncomfortable gap between the brand, which is all about this polished, minimalist, perfect elegance, and the reality of the woman who created it. Because when you dig into these sources, and we have a stack of them today, including biographies, business histories, and crucially declassified intelligence files, the reality is messy.
Messy is a very polite way of putting it. It is dark, it is complicated, and it is filled with contradictions.
It really is.
I think the central tension we need to explore today is this. Coco Chanel is the only fashion designer listed on Time magazine's list of the 100 most influential people of the 20th century.
That's a huge deal.
It's a huge accolade. It puts her up there with Einstein and Gandhi. She liberated women from corsets. She changed how we smell. She changed how we view a suntan. But her legacy is also deeply marred by betrayal, by ruthless ambition, and, as we will get into later, by active wartime collaboration with the Nazis.
It's a study in branding versus reality, right? How one woman's personal trauma and her prejudices shape the way women dress today.
Absolutely. And how a brand can sort of sanitize that history.
So let's unpack this. We have to start at the beginning, or at least the beginning that she tried so desperately to hide.
Yes.
Because one of the things that stands out immediately in the research is that Chanel was a compulsive liar about her own past.
She was a myth maker from day one. If you asked Chanel about her childhood, the story shifted constantly depending on who she was trying to impress or what narrative she was trying to spin.
So what was the official story she told?
Well, she claimed she was born a decade later than she actually was, which is a classic vanity move, sure. But she went deeper. She told people her father sailed to America to seek his fortune in the wine trade.
Right. A romantic, adventurous father.
She painted this picture of a somewhat tragic but comfortable upbringing with wealthy aunts in a country estate. It was all fiction.
But the documents tell a completely different story.
A completely different story. The reality was grim and, frankly, Dickensian. Gabrielle Chanel was born in 1883, and she wasn't born in a comfortable home. She was born in a charity hospital in Saumur.
Which was really a poorhouse.
It was a poorhouse, essentially. Her mother, Jean, was a laundrywoman who was constantly sick. Her father, Albert, was an itinerant street vendor who peddled work clothes and undergarments from a cart. They lived a nomadic, hand-to-mouth existence, traveling from market town to market town.
There's this one detail from her birth certificate that I found fascinating because it really encapsulates her relationship with her own identity.
The name.
The name. Her name is misspelled on the official record.
That's right. It's recorded as Chasnel with an S. Chasnel. It was a clerical error.
And how did that happen?
Her mother was too ill to attend the registration, and her father was, well, he was likely traveling or just absent, avoiding the cost or responsibility. So some clerk just wrote it down wrong.
But here's the telling part. Gabrielle never corrected it.
Never. Because to correct it legally would have meant admitting where she was born. Would mean producing the document that said hospice.
It would reveal the poverty.
Exactly. She would rather live with a typo on her legal documents for her entire life than reveal the shame of her birth. She took that secret to her grave.
That sets the stage for everything that follows. It's this deep, deep shame about where she came from. And things didn't get better.
No, they got much worse.
Her mother died young, right?
Yes, her mother died of tuberculosis at age 32. Gabrielle was only about 11 or 12 years old. And this is the moment of the great abandonment. The abandonment. Her father, this street peddler, didn't even try to keep the family together. He sent his 2 sons off to work as farm laborers, which was effectively indentured servitude.
And the daughters.
He took the 3 daughters, Gabrielle, Julia Bertha, and Antoinette, to the convent of Aubazine.
This is the orphanage.
Correct.
Yeah.
It was run by the Congregation of the Sacred Heart of Mary. It was an orphanage founded to care for the poor and rejected. A stark, frugal, strictly disciplined life.
And her father just left them there.
He dropped them off, promised he would come back for them, and never saw them again.
Just imagine the psychological impact of that. The abandonment issues must have been off the charts.
Completely. And it forged this incredible self-reliance in her, but also this profound hardness.
But here is where it gets really interesting for us, looking back at her designs. You can actually trace the DNA of the Chanel brand directly back to this dark, cold orphanage.
Absolutely. If you look at the aesthetic of Aubusine, it's all grays, blacks, and whites. It's austere. It's clean lines. There's no clutter, no fuss.
It's the Chanel color palette.
It is. That environment, which she hated and tried to hide, seeped into her visual vocabulary. And of course, it's also where she learned to sew. The nuns taught her the trade that would make her millions.
But it was more than just the sewing, wasn't it? It was a whole philosophy.
I think so. The philosophy of less is more likely started there. It wasn't minimalism as a chic choice. It was minimalism as a necessity. It was the only reality she knew for 6 years.
And the visual cues are so specific.
So specific. The nuns wore black habits with white wimples. That high contrast, black and white, became the signature Chanel look. The patterns on the stone floors of the abbey are said to have inspired the interlocking sea logo.
No way, really.
It's one of the strongest theories. The stained glass windows had these interlaced patterns. And even later in life, when she built her luxurious villa, La Pausa, the architecture included staircases and patio elements that were direct references to the Romanesque architecture of that orphanage.
So she was constantly trying to escape her past, yet she kept rebuilding it in her designs.
She was processing it through her work, consciously or not. It's fascinating.
So she leaves the convent at 18. She moves to a boarding house in Moulin, and this is where we get the birth of Coco.
Right.
She didn't start as a designer.
Right.
She wanted to be a performer.
She did. She had aspirations for the stage. She worked as a seamstress by day at a tailor shop, but at night she sang in a cabaret in Moulin called La Rotonde.
And what was this place like?
It was a cafe concert, a rowdy venue frequented by cavalry officers stationed nearby. This is a crucial detail, the military presence. She was surrounded by men with status and, more importantly, money.
But she wasn't a star, though. She was what they called a posesse.
That's right.
A possess. What does that entail?
Basically, a performer who entertained the crowd between the main acts. You sang a song or two while the headliner changed costumes, and then you walked through the crowd passing a plate to collect money.
So it was correct.
Yeah.
Not glamorous.
Not at all. It was humiliating work, really. It was begging with a song.
And the name Coco, where does that come from?
There are two main theories, and both are interesting. Theory A is that it came from the songs she sang. She had a limited repertoire that included these catchy, silly songs like Coco Rico, which mimicked a rooster crowing, and Kikavu Coco, which translates to Who Has Seen Coco, a song about a girl who lost her dog. So the officers would call out, Coco, Coco, when they wanted her to sing.
And Theory B?
Theory B is a bit darker, but linguistically plausible. It's an allusion to the French word cocotte, which means a kept woman or a courtesan.
Ah.
Given the environment of the cabaret, where women were often looking for wealthy protectors among the officers, the nickname likely carried a double entendre. It was playful, but it marked her social status.
And I assume she didn't make it as a singer.
No. She tried to get a gig in Vichy, which was a more upscale resort town with a proper stage, but her voice was described as marginal. She realized pretty quickly that she wasn't going to be the next great chanteuse. She didn't have the talent for the stage.
So the stage door closes and the bedroom door opens, if we could be that blunt.
We can.
Because her entry into high society, and really her entry into the world of luxury, comes through men. She realized early on that men were the key to the door she wanted to open.
It does. She becomes the mistress of Etienne Balsan. He was a wealthy textile heir and an ex-cavalry officer she met at the cabaret.
So he was her ticket out.
He was. At 23, she moves into his estate, the Chateau Royal. And this is a massive shift. She goes from the poorhouse and the seamstress shop to a world of horses, hunting, and pure decadence.
This is where she sees what the rich life actually looks like.
Exactly. And it's not just observing it, she's participating in it. Balsan showered her with diamonds, pearls, and dresses. But the interesting thing is, she rejected a lot of the fussy fashion of the other courtesans. She starts borrowing from the men's wardrobe. She starts wearing equestrian gear. She realizes she can't ride a horse aggressively in a restrictive dress, so she wears trousers or dodpers. She takes his tweed jackets, his ties.
She's adapting.
She's adapting for comfort and function. And she starts designing hats as a diversion, just something to do while living this life of leisure. She would take the hats of the other women, which were covered in fruit and stuffed birds, and strip them down, making them simple, stark straw
The
boaters.
Chanel aesthetic is already there.
It's bubbling up, but she doesn't stay with Balsan forever. She leaves him for his friend, which is a bit of a scandal in itself.
Yes, enter Arthur Boy Capel.
He is arguably the love of her life. Chanel famously said of this time, "Two gentlemen were outbidding for my hot little body."
She was very unsentimental about it.
Very. It shows how transactional she viewed these relationships, even the most important one. Capel was English, from a wealthy industrial family, and had a very different style than the French aristocrats. He wore blazers, he used jersey fabrics for his sports gear, he was a polo player.
And he puts his money where his mouth is.
He finances her, he sees her talent with the hats and believes in her, he sets her up, he pays for her first shops in Paris and Deauville, but his influence goes way beyond the bank account.
You mean his style?
His personal style, his wardrobe inspired the Chanel look, the blazers, the clean lines, the androgyny. There is even a theory that the iconic square design of the Chanel No. 5 bottle was adapted from his toiletry bottles or his whiskey decanter.
That is wild. You look at that perfume bottle today and you see the epitome of feminine luxury. But it might just be a whiskey decanter from her English lover.
It shows how she absorbed everything around her. She was a sponge for style cues that she could then refine and sell.
But this relationship ends in tragedy.
A terrible tragedy. Capel died in a car accident in 1919. It devastated her. She told a friend, "In losing Capel, I lost everything."
She never really got over it, did she?
It doesn't seem so. She reportedly commissioned a roadside memorial at the site of the crash. It hardened her, it fueled her ambition, but it also left her very alone at the top. She never married, and crucially, she never relied on a man financially again after that.
Before he died, though, they had already started the revolution. They opened boutiques in Deauville and Biarritz.
Right, and this is where the brand really starts to take shape. It wasn't haute couture initially, it was deluxe casual clothing.
And the timing was perfect.
Timing is everything. She opens in Deauville in 1913. This is a seaside resort for the rich, right before and then during the start of World War I. Women's lives were changing.
And she used her family as marketing.
Brilliant marketing. She used her sister Antoinette and her Aunt Adrienne as living mannequins. They would walk the boardwalks in Deauville wearing her simple, chic creations. Everyone asks, who are those girls and where did they get those outfits?
And she opens in Biarritz in 1915, which was neutral territory during the war.
Yes, a villa opposite a casino. It was a huge success. The wives of rich industrialists from Spain and other neutral countries flocked to her. The business was so massive she reimbursed Capel's entire investment within a year. By 1919, she is officially a registered couturière.
And the clothes themselves were radically different. Let's talk about jersey. Today, we think of jersey as just t-shirt material. But back then, using jersey for women's clothing was insane.
It was scandalous. Before Chanel, jersey and tricot were used almost exclusively for men's underwear.
Men's underwear.
Yes, it was considered an ordinary fabric. It was difficult to handle it, unraveled if you cut it wrong, and it didn't hold a rigid structure. Couture was all about structure boning, taffeta, stiffness. Jersey was the opposite of that.
So why did she use it?
Two reasons, and both are classic Chanel. Functionality and cost. Remember, she was cost-conscious in the beginning. Jersey was cheap. She bought surplus stock from a manufacturer named Rodier.
But the bigger reason was the aha moment about what women needed.
Exactly. The changing world. World War I meant women were working. They were nurses. They were in factories. They were volunteering. They couldn't be strapped into corsets. They needed to move. They needed to ride bicycles. They needed to be able to dress themselves without a maid because the maids were working in munitions factories.
So she takes this cheap underwear fabric and turns it into high fashion because it allows women to actually breathe and live.
Precisely. She liberated the body. She made the poor look expensive. It's the ultimate subversion. She takes the fabric of the working class and sells it to the aristocracy. She basically said, luxury must be comfortable, otherwise it is not luxury.
And speaking of subversion, we have to talk about the suntan. Because this is another thing we take for granted now, but she basically invented the concept of the fashionable tan.
She did, and you have to understand what a massive cultural shift this was. Historically, pale skin was the mark of the upper class.
Right, it meant you didn't have to work in the fields.
A tan was for peasants. It was a sign of labor. But Chanel goes to the Riviera. She spends too much time on a yacht with the Duke of Westminster. She sunbathes, and she comes back to Paris bronzed.
And because she is Chanel.
Suddenly, a tan becomes a symbol of leisure. It means you have the time and money to sit on a yacht in the Mediterranean. She completely flipped the script on class markers, just with her own skin color.
The power she had is just staggering. And then, of course, the little black dress, the LBD.
1926, Vogue publishes a drawing of a simple black Chanel dress. They called it the Ford of fashion, referencing the Model T Ford.
Which doesn't sound like a compliment for high fashion, but it was.
It was a massive compliment. It meant it was the new standard. It was modern, accessible, and ubiquitous. Before Chanel, black was for mourning or for servants. She made it chic.
And I bet the establishment hated it.
The male journalists hated it. They complained that there was no more bosom, no more stomach, no more rump. They said she was erasing the female form. But Chanel didn't care. She said, I imposed black. It's still going strong today. And she was right.
And it also became practical during the Depression.
Absolutely essential. It was affordable elegance. You could have one good black dress and change the look with accessories. It was democratizing style.
So by the late 20s and 30s, she is the queen of fashion. But she wants more. She wants into the perfume game.
Yes.
And this leads us to what I call the perfume war. This is a business saga that spans decades and gets incredibly nasty.
This is the seed of the darkness that comes later. In 1921, she creates Chanel No. 5 with the perfumer Ernest Beau. It was revolutionary, the first perfume to use aldehydes, which gave it that sparkle.
But she couldn't make it and sell it on her own, not at scale.
No, she didn't have the manufacturing or distribution network to sell it globally. So in 1924, she strikes a deal with the Wertheimer brothers, Pierre and Paul.
And who were they?
They were the directors of the Bourgeois Perfume House, the biggest cosmetic company in France at the time. They had the factories, the supply chains, the global reach.
And the breakdown of this deal is infamous.
It is. The Wertheimers put up all the capital. They handle production, marketing, distribution, everything. For taking on all that risk and for providing all that infrastructure, they take 70% of the profits.
Okay.
The broker who introduced them, Théophile Bader, who founded the Galeries Lafayette, he takes 20%.
And Chanel?
She gets 10%.
10%. Now, at the time, 10% of zero is zero, so maybe it seemed okay.
At the time, she probably thought, I put in no money, I do no work, I get a check. It was passive income. But once Nun 5 became the biggest selling perfume in the world, that 10% gnawed at her.
She felt cheated.
She felt completely cheated. She referred to Pierre Wertheimer as the bandit who screwed me. She spent the next 20 years obsessed with getting control of the company back. She hired lawyers, she sued them, she smeared them in the press.
And that obsession leads us directly into the darkest chapter of her life, World War II.
Yes. This is where the story shifts from a business drama to a war thriller.
So, 1939, war breaks out. What does Chanel do?
She closes the couture house. Immediately. She fires 4,000 employees, putting them out on the street at the beginning of a war.
What was her reasoning?
The official line might have been, it's not a time for fashion, but sources suggest this was retaliation. There had been a general labor strike in 1936 where workers demanded higher wages and better conditions, and they locked her out of her own shop. Chanel never forgave them.
So she saw the war as an opportunity for revenge.
It seems so. She saw it as a chance to shut it all down and put those women out of work as punishment.
That is incredibly petty. But what she does next is, well, it's treasonous. She moves into the Hotel Ritz.
The Ritz was the headquarters for the German military staff in Paris. It was the epicenter of the occupation. She didn't just live there. She lived there comfortably in a luxury suite alongside the highest-ranking German officers.
And she takes a lover, Baron Hans Gunther von Dinklage, known as Spatz.
Yes, Spatz.
Tell us about him.
He wasn't just some German aristocrat with a fancy title. He was an operative in military intelligence, the Abwehr. He had been a spy since the 1920s. He reported directly to Berlin. He was a professional intelligence officer.
And he was her ticket to a comfortable life during the war.
He was. He eased her life at the Ritz. He protected her. He was her ticket to safety and luxury while the rest of Paris was starving and freezing.
And she decides to use the Nazi occupation to finally settle the score with the Wertheimers.
This is truly damning. She attempts to use the Nazi Aryanization laws to seize the perfume company.
Explain what those laws were.
These were laws designed to strip Jews of their property, their businesses, their homes, their art, and hand it all over to Aryans. The Wertheimers were Jewish.
So she weaponized anti-Semitism for business.
She did. She petitions the German officials, writing that the company Parfums Chanel is still the property of Jews and claiming her indisputable right to sole ownership. She tries to use the Holocaust, essentially, to get a better business deal.
That is chilling. Does it work?
No. The Wertheimers were smart. They saw this coming. Before they fled to the U.S. in 1940, they legally transferred control of the company to a Christian friend, a French businessman named Felix Amiot.
And who is Amiot?
Amiot supplied aircraft to the Germans, so he was untouchable. He was a collaborator himself, but a useful one. So when the Germans looked into the perfume company, it was technically Aryan-owned.
He was outmaneuvered?
Completely. Amiot held the company for them throughout the war and then gave it right back to them afterward. Chanel was outmaneuvered by the very people she tried to destroy.
But she didn't stop at trying to steal the business. She actually became an operative. We have the documents now.
We do. Declassified files from the French Defense Ministry, released after her death, show she was listed as an agent for German military intelligence, the Abwehr. Her agent number was F7124.
And her code name was Westminster.
Codename Westminster.
Why that name?
It was a nod to her previous affair with the Duke of Westminster, who was one of the wealthiest men in Britain. It, again, shows this bizarre mixing of her social life and her espionage. She treated international espionage like a social club.
So what did Agent Westminster actually do?
Her big mission was called Operation Model Hut.
Which means model hat.
Model hat. This was late in the war, 1943 into 1944. The Germans were losing. Some of the SS leadership, specifically Walter Schellenberg, who was high up in the intelligence service, wanted to broker a separate peace with Britain to avoid total annihilation.
And Chanel thought she could help with this.
She proposed that she could use her personal connection to Winston Churchill, who she knew from her days with the Duke of Westminster, to act as an intermediary.
She thought she could just walk up to Churchill and end the war.
Her ego was that big. She believed her charm and her connections could solve World War II. She travels to Madrid with her SS contact to try and meet Sir Samuel Hoare, the British ambassador, hoping to get a message to Churchill.
And what happened?
The whole plan collapsed immediately. She traveled with a woman named Vera Bate Lombardi, who was also connected to Churchill. But Lombardi, upon arriving in Madrid, realized she was being used as a pawn for the Nazis and promptly denounced Chanel as a spy to the British embassy.
So the mission fails, the war ends, the Nazis are defeated, collaborators are being shaved bald and marched through the streets of Paris, or worse, executed. How on earth does Chanel escape justice?
She is interrogated by the Free French Purge Committee in 1944, but she is released within a few hours.
How is that possible?
There was no documented evidence available at that moment to hold her. The files we have now were still hidden in German archives. But the rumors and her own claims persist that she played her trump card, Winston Churchill. She told people, "Churchill had me freed."
Why would Churchill protect a Nazi agent?
That is the million-dollar question. The prevailing theory is that Churchill wasn't protecting Chanel. He was protecting the British aristocracy and even members of the royal family.
How so?
Chanel knew everyone's secrets. She knew which powerful British figures had been sympathetic to the Nazis before the war. A public trial would have aired all that dirty laundry. It's very likely Churchill intervened to keep it quiet and prevent a massive scandal for the crown.
So she goes into exile in Switzerland. Yeah. She's safe, but she's out of the game.
For a while. She spends almost a decade in Switzerland living off her perfume money. But she's watching. She sees fashion changing. The 1950s come around and Christian Dior launches the new look.
And she hates it.
She loathes it. The new look was everything she fought against. It was cinched waists, padded hips, structured busts. It was the return of the corset, essentially. It was heavy. It was restrictive.
What'd she say about it?
She called it illogical. She said, Dior doesn't dress women, he upholsters them. She couldn't stand seeing her life's work of liberation being undone by a man.
So in 1954, at over 70 years old, she decides to make a comeback. But she needs money. And this is the part that blows my mind.
Yes.
Who pays for the comeback?
This is the ultimate irony. Pierre Wertheimer. The man she called a bandit. The man she tried to use the Nazis to destroy. He finances her return.
Why? Why on earth would he do that?
Business. Pure pragmatism. He owned the perfume. The perfume was still a cash cow, but the Chanel brand needed the glamour of the couture house to stay relevant. If Chanel faded into obscurity, the perfume might too.
So he needed her name to sell his product.
He needed her name. So they made a new deal, a much better deal for her this time. She got her wartime profits, which were huge, about $9 million in today's money, plus 2% of global matcher, 5 sales for life, and Wertheimer agreed to pay all her living expenses. Forever.
Talk about failing upwards. She tried to ruin him, and he ended up paying her rent for the rest of her life.
It's an incredible business story.
So she opens her comeback show, 1954. What's the reaction?
The French press destroyed her. They hadn't forgotten the war. They called the collection old-fashioned and made pointed references to her collaboration. They sat on their hands in silence. It was a disaster in Paris. But the Americans and the British loved it.
Really?
They didn't care as much about the politics. They cared about the clothes. Vogue US hailed it as a breakthrough. They loved the youthful elegance and the comfort.
And an editor bought a suit, right?
Yes, Bettina Ballard, a Vogue editor, bought a suit for herself right after the show. And that sparked the sales in the US. The American market saved her.
And this is when we get the icons that we know today, the definitive versions.
Yes. The comeback gave us the Chanel suit as we know it. And again, this is about engineering as much as style. The jacket was cut on the straight grain so it didn't buckle or pull. No stiffening, no shoulder pads.
And the chain in the hem.
The famous gold chain sewn into the silk lining of the hem just to make it hang perfectly flat. It was all about function.
I read about the bust test.
Yes. She would make models step up onto a platform as if they were climbing the high step of a bus or bend down like they were getting into a low sports car. If the skirt hiked up too much or the armhole restricted movement, she would rip it apart and start over. It had to work for modern life.
And the bag? The 2.55?
Launched in February 1955, hence the name, 2.55. And this bag is an autobiography in leather.
How so?
The shoulder strap. She was tired of holding clutches at parties. She wanted her hands free for a drink and a cigarette, like a soldier's bag.
Okay, that makes sense.
The chain strap. It echoes the chatelaines, the keychains, worn by the nun caretakers at the orphanage. The burgundy lining, that was the color of the convent uniforms. The quilting. Inspired by the jockey jackets she saw in her days with Etienne Balsan.
She literally carried her entire history on her shoulder.
And sold it to the world as the ultimate status symbol.
Let's touch on the jewelry before we wrap up the legacy.
Yeah.
Because she had a very specific philosophy there, too.
She revolutionized jewelry by mixing the real with the fake. She would wear massive ropes of faux pearls mixed with real gemstones from her aristocratic lovers. Her attitude was, "It's disgusting to walk around with millions around the neck. I only like fake jewelry because it's provocative."
She made costume jewelry chic.
She made it a statement. She decoupled value from preciousness. It was about style, not just wealth.
So in her final years, she's rich, she's successful, the brand is back on top. Was she happy?
By all accounts, no. She became tyrannical, bitter, and incredibly lonely. She worked constantly. She was a habitual morphine user, a habit she'd had since 1935.
Morphine.
Yes, she would inject herself to sleep. She died in 1971 at the Ritz, the same hotel she lived in with the Nazis, her home for over 30 years. Her final words to her maid were, "You see, this is how you die."
Wow. Stark to the end.
It is.
So let's try to synthesize this. We have this woman who is a genius of design, a pioneer of feminism and fashion, but also a collaborator, a liar, and a generally difficult human being. How do we reconcile that?
I think we have to view her through the lens of functionalism and survival. She was a functionalist in her clothes pockets, comfortable fabrics, freedom of movement, but she was also a functionalist in her morals. She did whatever worked.
Whatever she needed to do to survive and to win.
Exactly. When she was poor, she used men to get rich. When she needed fabric, she used cheap jersey. When the Nazis occupied Paris, she used them to stay in the Ritz and try to crush her business partners. She was utterly ruthless about her own survival and comfort.
You can't separate the genius from the darkness. The 2.55 bag literally carries the memories of the orphanage. The perfume bottle might be a lover's whiskey decanter. The business empire exists because she made a deal with the devil, and then another deal with the people she tried to destroy.
Exactly. And she died thinking she had controlled the narrative that she had won. But here's a final provocative thought for our listeners. When she died, she had plans for a monumental state funeral in Paris. She wanted to be celebrated as a French icon.
And what happened?
As soon as she passed, French intelligence released some of those damaging documents we talked about, the files on Agent Westminster. Suddenly, the truth was out. The funeral plans were quietly scaled back. The state stayed away. She was buried quietly in Switzerland.
The truth always catches up, eventually.
It does.
So here is the question for you listening today. Next time you walk through a department store and you see that white box with the black edges, or you see the double C logo on a handbag, does knowing the origin of the brand, the attempt to use Nazi laws to seize the business, the spy number F7124, does that change how you see the luxury?
Or is the brand now bigger than the woman? Has it successfully outlived her sins?
That is the question. Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you in the next one.